There's a rule that almost nobody in finance will say out loud. It is not taught in business schools, it is not printed in wealth management brochures, but it is understood, quietly, precisely, by every family that has successfully passed money across 3 or more generations. The rule is this: you do not protect wealth from inflation, you protect it from people. Sit with that for a moment, because everything you are about to hear flows from that single, uncomfortable truth. The image versus the reality. Close your eyes and picture the classic inheritance scene. A 22-year-old walks out of the lawyer's office holding a check with more zeros than they have ever seen in their life. They're grinning. The family patriarch, freshly buried, has done his duty. He worked for decades, built something extraordinary, and now, in a single afternoon, it has been handed over. That image is a fantasy, and in real wealth management circles, it is considered a catastrophic design flaw. What actually happens in the families that keep their fortunes intact across generations looks nothing like that scene. There is no handover, there is no check, there is a pipeline. A pipeline has pressure, it has valves, it has flow rates. You can draw from it, but you cannot drain it. You can benefit from it, but you cannot dismantle it. The heir does not receive the wealth. The heir is connected to the wealth, and there is a profound architectural difference between those two things. By 2026, the number of family offices, the private institutional infrastructure that manages these controlled systems, has surged dramatically. In the United States alone, they now manage approximately $5 trillion in assets. These are not investment firms. These are fortresses, built not to keep money in, but to keep certain human behaviors out. The question is, which behaviors? Why do the ultra-rich spend extraordinary resources protecting their wealth from their own children? The answer lies in what wealth professionals quietly call the 5 killers. The first killer is the most seductive. The moment a person knows they are wealthy, or soon will be, their cost of living begins to expand. Quietly at first. A nicer apartment, better flights, a wardrobe that keeps pace with a new social circle. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it is engineered into human psychology. We anchor our spending to our peer group. The moment an heir steps into wealth, their peer group upgrades, and their spending chases it. Here is the brutal mathematics. A $10 million inheritance sounds enormous until you realize that a person living at $300,000 a year in after-tax expenses, a perfectly modest lifestyle by ultra-high net worth standards, will exhaust that principal in roughly 25 years, assuming average investment returns. Add a luxury property, private school tuition for 3 children, and a taste for business class, and you are looking at far less. Burn rate does not announce itself as a threat. It arrives disguised as a reward. Bad partners. The legal merger problem. This one is rarely discussed in polite company, but it is devastatingly common. When an heir marries, they do not just merge their lives. Depending on the jurisdiction, they potentially merge their assets. Divorce is not just an emotional catastrophe. In the absence of proper legal structure, it is a liquidation event. Roughly 40 to 50% of first marriages in the United States end in divorce. Among the ultra-wealthy, that percentage is not dramatically lower, but the consequences are dramatically higher. A single contested divorce, absent a well-crafted prenuptial agreement and robust asset protection structure, can cleave a family fortune in half in a matter of months. The family office professionals who have seen this pattern repeatedly describe it the same way. The heir didn't lose the money to a bad investment. They lost it to Tuesday's court filing. Lawsuits. Being a payout opportunity. Wealth makes you a target. This is not paranoia. It's a feature of the legal landscape. The moment someone is publicly or even privately known to have significant assets, they become what attorneys call a payout opportunity. Slip and fall suits, business disputes, personal injury claims, legitimate or otherwise. The calculations a plaintiff's attorney makes are simple. If the defendant has money, the lawsuit is worth filing, even on thin grounds, because settlement is almost always cheaper than litigation. The wealthy understand this, and so they build structures specifically designed to make themselves appear to own nothing, not as fraud, but as legal architecture. The right trust structure means that an heir who gets sued does not lose the family assets, because in the eyes of the law, those assets were never truly theirs to seize in the first place. 4. Tax liquidation. Selling the engine for cash. This is perhaps the most technically devastating of the 5 killers, and the one most often ignored by heirs who are not financially sophisticated. When wealth is held in productive assets, a portfolio of businesses, real estate, private equity stakes, it is a compounding engine. It generates returns. Those returns compound. Over decades, even a modestly managed engine grows at a pace that can comfortably sustain a family dynasty indefinitely. But here is what happens when an heir, short on patience or long on ambition, decides they want cash. They sell. And the moment they sell a compounding engine, 2 catastrophic things happen simultaneously. First, they trigger a tax event, capital gains taxes that can consume 20 to 37% of the value immediately. Second, they stop the compounding loop entirely. A $50 million business that grows at 8% annually is worth $233 million in 20 years. Convert it to cash today, pay the taxes, spend the net proceeds, and the dynasty is over. Not because the money was wasted, but because the machine was destroyed. The heir traded a perpetual engine for a one-time wallet. And a wallet, as we will return to, always gets emptied. 5. Ego projects. Expensive self-expression. The 5th killer is the one the ultra-rich discuss with the most resignation. The failed restaurant, the vanity record label, the tech startup built around a passion with no market, the movie production company. These are what insiders call ego projects, investments that are not really investments at all, but self-expression funded by other people's compound returns. The heir is not building something, they are performing wealth, and performance is almost always unprofitable. The tragic irony is that ego projects feel like entrepreneurship. They carry the language of ambition and vision, but without the pressure of real skin in the game, without the genuine fear of ruin that made the original wealth creator so sharp, they become extraordinarily expensive hobbies dressed in business casual. Here is where dynasties diverge from ordinary families. Ordinary families, when they think about inheritance, think about transfer. How do we give what we have to the people we love? It is a generous instinct. It is also, architecturally, a fatal one. Dynasty families think about something entirely different. They ask, how do we allow the people we love to benefit from what we built, without ever giving them the power to destroy it? This is the secret formula. And it rests on a principle that sounds simple but requires sophisticated legal engineering to execute: the separation of ownership, control, and benefit. Think of it this way. A fruit tree sits in a garden. Ordinary inheritance picks the tree up by its roots and hands it to the next generation. They own it now. They can tend it, let it wither, chop it down, sell the wood. The decision is entirely theirs. And if they choose poorly, as human beings frequently do, the tree is gone. Dynasty inheritance does something different. It says, you may walk in this garden every day. You may eat the fruit freely. In a good year, you may fill baskets with it, but you may never cut down the tree. The tree belongs not to you as an individual, but to the institution, to the trust, to the family entity, to the structure that extends across generations you will never meet. The heir can enjoy the fruit. They cannot touch the roots. This is not cruelty. It is the most profound act of generational love available in the legal toolkit. because the alternative, handing the heir the chainsaw along with the orchard, has a well-documented historical outcome. So, how specifically do dynasties build this structure? In 2026, these are the primary legal and institutional mechanisms in use, the 7 locks that separate benefiting from owning. Lock 1. The trust, the foundation that prevents liquidation. The trust is the foundational instrument. Rather than leaving assets directly to an heir, the wealth creator transfers them into a legal entity, the trust, that is governed by documents, not by the emotions of the moment. The trust has a grantor, the wealth creator, a trustee, who manages the assets, and beneficiaries, the heirs who receive distributions. Crucially, the beneficiaries do not own the assets. They have a right to specified distributions from the assets. This means creditors cannot claim trust assets, divorcing spouses cannot access them, and impulsive heirs cannot liquidate them. The trust is not simply a tax tool, it is a behavioral constraint embedded in legal concrete. Lock 2. The spendthrift clause, the lawsuit shield. Within the trust, a spendthrift clause is a specific provision that prevents beneficiaries from assigning their future distributions as collateral, and, more critically, prevents creditors from reaching anticipated distributions before they are paid. In plain language, if an heir gets sued, the plaintiff cannot go to a judge and say, "Order the trust to pay my judgment." The spendthrift provision legally insulates the pipeline from external claims. The heir is protected not because they are hidden, but because the structure is designed to be piercing resistant. Lock 3. Staggered access, fixing the age 18 design flaw. The practice of distributing a lump sum at the age of majority, 18, 21, or 25, is a design flaw so obvious that it's almost hard to believe it persists, and yet it does, in unsophisticated estate plans across the country. Consider, what does a 22-year-old know about maintaining a compounding engine? What life experience do they carry that would prepare them to resist the burn rate, the ego projects, the social pressure that sudden wealth creates? Sophisticated trusts solve this with staggered distributions, releasing access to capital in tranches tied to age, life milestones, or demonstrated behavior. Perhaps a partial distribution at 25, another at 30, another at 35. By the time the heir has access to the full instrument, they have also had a decade of experience managing smaller amounts, building financial identity, and demonstrating, or failing to demonstrate, the disposition required to steward something larger. Staggered access does not restrict the heir, it protects them from themselves during the years when the risk of catastrophic mismanagement is highest. Lock 4. Incentive distributions. Connecting money to behavior. This is one of the most elegant and increasingly common mechanisms in modern trust design. Rather than distributing wealth based solely on age, incentive trusts tie distributions to specific behaviors. Common examples: the trustee matches the beneficiary's earned income dollar for dollar up to a cap, or distributions are unlocked upon completing a college degree, or maintaining sobriety, or running a business for 3 years, or they are suspended without being eliminated if certain criteria are not met. The philosophy here is precise. The trust is not punishing the heir. It is ensuring that the receipt of passive wealth does not remove the motivation that creates engaged, capable human beings. The founding generation understood something critical. It was the pressure of necessity and the satisfaction of earned success that built their character. They are, with incentive distributions, engineering the same pressure into the next generation, not through deprivation but through design. Lock 5. Voting versus economic rights, keeping decisions with competence. This lock applies particularly to family-owned businesses held across generations. It addresses one of the most politically charged questions in dynasty management: who gets to vote and who just gets to profit? The answer, in sophisticated structures, is a categorical separation of voting rights from economic rights. A family business may have two classes of shares. Class A shares carry economic benefit, the dividends, the distributions, the upside. Class B shares carry governance rights, the board seats, the strategic decisions, the power to hire and fire leadership. The economically entitled heirs may hold Class A shares. The governance responsibilities may be concentrated in a family trust, a family office, or in the hands of the family members who have demonstrated the competence to exercise them. This structure acknowledges a truth that is politically uncomfortable but operationally essential. The fact that someone was born into a family does not mean they should control the enterprise that family built. Entitlement to benefit is not the same as fitness to govern. Lock 6. Family governance, running the family like an institution. By the third generation, a wealthy family is not a family in the conventional sense. It is an institution with competing interests, divergent geographies, different values, and the full complexity of human relationship. If it is not governed like one, it collapses like one. Family governance structures typically include a family council, a representative body that meets regularly to discuss strategy, values, and family business. They include a family constitution, a document that articulates the family's mission, its values, its rules for conflict resolution, and its expectations of family members who participate in the enterprise. They may include a family bank, an internal lending mechanism that allows family members to access capital for approved purposes without triggering distributions. And they almost always include a family education program, a formal process for preparing the rising generation to understand what they are part of, what their responsibilities are, and what the history of the institution is. The family that runs itself like an institution is not being cold or corporate. It is being honest about complexity. And complexity, left ungoverned, has a well-documented tendency to destroy. Lock 7. The psychological architecture. Entitlement as the ultimate threat. This is the lock that does not appear in any legal document, and yet it may be the most important of all. Entitlement, the deep psychological belief that one deserves abundance without effort, that the compounding engine exists to serve one's wants rather than one's purpose, is what converts a dynasty into a cautionary tale. The psychology is straightforward and devastating. When a person receives wealth without earning it, they often lose something critical, the internal locus of control that produces ambitious, resilient human beings. They trade agency for passivity. They stop asking, "What can I build?" and start asking, "What can I access?" And the compounding engine, designed to run forever, is slowly dismantled to fill the requests of someone who was never taught that the machine matters more than any single withdrawal. Entitlement turns a compounding engine into a wallet, and a wallet, by its nature, exists to be spent. It has no flywheel, no reinvestment mechanism, no governance structure. It is a container, and containers empty. The ultra-rich understand this. It is why the most sophisticated family offices in the world invest as heavily in next-generation education and psychological preparation as they do in tax optimization. The legal locks mean nothing if the heir who sits within them has developed the internal posture of an entitled beneficiary rather than a responsible steward.
Let us talk about something that rarely makes it into the financial press. The families that successfully transfer wealth across multiple generations are not primarily distinguished by their legal sophistication. They are distinguished by the stories they tell about money. In families where wealth evaporates, money is spoken of as a destination, as proof, as reward. You worked hard, you earned this, now enjoy it. The implication is that the journey is over, that the wealth is the conclusion of the story. In families where wealth multiplies, money is spoken of as a responsibility with a history. The founder's story is told and retold, not as mythology, but as instruction. The message embedded in the family culture is not, "Look what we have," but look what we are protecting and why, and for whom. The wealth is not the end of the story. It is the middle of one that started before the heir was born and will continue long after they are gone. This is the psychological architecture that makes the legal locks work. Without it, the most perfectly designed trust in the world will eventually be picked apart by beneficiaries who have the resources to hire lawyers clever enough to find the gaps. With it, the heir becomes something remarkable, a person who wants to be a good steward, who feels the weight of the institution, who understands that cutting down the tree is not just financially catastrophic, it is a betrayal of something larger than themselves. That psychological orientation cannot be written into a trust document. It must be cultivated over years through family culture, through storytelling, through the deliberate, patient work of preparing the next generation not just to receive wealth, but to deserve the responsibility of it.
You may be listening to this and thinking, this is fascinating, but I am not managing a $500 million family office. I have $800,000 saved, a business worth a couple of million, and 3 children I want to protect. Here is what matters. The principles scale. You do not need a fleet of attorneys and a governance committee to apply the core architecture of dynasty thinking. You need a clear-eyed understanding of the 5 killers and a willingness to build even modest versions of the 7 locks. Start with a revocable living trust. It costs far less than you expect and provides an immediate structural layer between your assets and the chaos of probate, creditor claims, and impulsive liquidation. Name a professional co-trustee, not just a family member, who can provide independent judgment when emotions run high. Add a spendthrift provision. Even in a modest trust, it costs almost nothing to include and provides meaningful creditor protection. Think carefully about the age at which your children receive full access. 25 is arguably too young for large sums. 30 is better. Stagger it. Give them a portion to practice with. Let them make manageable mistakes before the stakes are existential. Have the money conversation with your children, early and honestly, not to frighten them, but to include them in the story. Tell them what you built, what it cost, and what you hope it will mean for their lives and the lives beyond them. The heir who understands the history of an asset is significantly less likely to treat it as a windfall. And protect the engine. Whatever form your compounding machine takes, a business, a real estate portfolio, an investment account, resist the pressure to liquidate it for lifestyle. The moment you convert it to cash, you have ended the compounding loop. The tax hit alone can take decades to recover from. Building the machine is only half the battle. The other half, the half that dynasty families have spent centuries mastering, is ensuring that the operator doesn't break it.
The ultra-rich are not protecting their wealth because they distrust their children. The most sophisticated among them are doing something far more nuanced. They are protecting their children from a version of themselves that sudden, unstructured access to enormous wealth tends to create. The pipeline is not a cage. It is a gift with a design, one that says, you will never worry about money, you will always have access to what you need, you will benefit enormously from what this family built, but you will never be given the power to end the story in a single generation of bad decisions. The tree will be here when you are gone, and your children, if the structure holds and if the culture is cultivated, will eat from it too. That is not the inheritance trap. That is the inheritance triumph. The trap is the check.